Letters of John Nelson Darby, Volume 1, Letter 103F, of 1031. p. 199, Emailin, to the same. From the French. Beloved brother, your letter reached me here on my way. I answer without delay. Anxiety which anticipates evil is not the faith which faces the difficulties through which God sees it well to make us pass, and in which the conscience is consequently engaged. Mr. W. had engaged me to write to Switzerland on the subject of this business. I am waiting, while leaning on the goodness of the Lord, who loves his church, who knows if it ought to trouble them. I am waiting on God that he may grant them to be faithful, and give them all the necessary instruction if the difficulty arises. He has done so already in a wonderful way in the case of Mr. N.'s agents who went there. Why should I not trust him for every other case? I do not wish to raise questions where the brethren are in peace, hoping that God will give the needful wisdom when the question is raised. Why occupy them with it beforehand, when the conscience is not yet involved? With regard to Mr. I have not seen him since the Bethesda question arose, so it is possible that by presenting the matter clearly to him and to his conscience he would be brought back, even if he has at present gone astray. I suppose that he is more or less connected with Bethesda. Now if it is so, and if he rejected warnings, and persisted in keeping up connection with B, I could not walk with him. I am going to tell you why, leaving him aside, not knowing what would be the effect of a conversation with him. First I must tell you that I believe that if one meeting receives the members of another, and the members of the former go there in their turn, there is a bond between the two, although I own that in the present case other motives have power over me. This is how it is then as to be. Doctrine is not in question, but faithfulness to Christ with respect to doctrine or holiness. I would not receive a person who knowingly formed part of a meeting which admits heretics, or persons whose conduct is bad, because the principle of indifference to good and evil, to error and truth, is as bad as the wrong action, and even worse. Let me be clearly understood. I believe that the Church is bound to be jealous with respect to the glory of the person of Christ. If Christ is despised, I have no principle of union. I believe that B. has acted with profound contempt for the Lord, to say nothing of brethren. Here there is nothing equivocal. Mr. N. was maintaining a doctrine of which Mr. Muller himself said that if it were true, Christ would have needed to be saved as much as we did. This doctrine placed Christ under the effect of Adam's sin by his birth, in saying that he had to gain life by keeping the law. We had driven away this doctrine and those who upheld it, and the struggle was ended. The persons who had supported Mr. N. had published confessions with respect to the doctrine, and had made confessions before the brethren publicly of the falsehoods and wickedness by which they had tried to make good their views and to justify themselves. It was a truly extraordinary work of Satan. Well, a lady wished to introduce Mr. N. to teach in a meeting near Bethesda. This meeting refused. She left the meeting accordingly. She was introduced at B. Mr. M., knowing that she was maintaining and propagating this doctrine, Mr. Craik the other pastor having had to do with her. She went there because they admitted such persons into that meeting. At the same time, two gentlemen, who made part of the meeting which Mr. N. had formed when he was obliged to leave on account of his doctrine, those who had supported him having left him and made confession, these two communicants of Mr. N.'s, I say, were also admitted to B. It is proved true that these three disseminated Mr. N.'s tracts in the B. assembly. The lady induced a young lady to go who was the most active and intelligent agent that Mr. N. had, in order to spread his doctrines. In consequence of these circumstances, several godly brothers of B. asked that all this should be examined. They said that they did not ask even that the judgment of the brethren should be taken thereupon, but that they should examine the matter and the doctrine themselves. This was decidedly refused. I received a letter from Mr. C., blaming me as sectarian for making these difficulties, even when he was not prepared to receive everything that Mr. N. was teaching. They had many meetings of the flock and the 10 laboring brothers, of whom 2 were really disciples of Mr. N., Messrs. M. and C., at their head, presented a written paper to the assembly at B., declaring that this was a new test of communion, which they would not admit, that many excellent brethren did not give so decided an opinion upon Mr. N.'s doctrine, that they were not bound to read 50 pages to know what Mr. N. taught, the members of his flock being, mark this, already admitted at B. A brother asked permission to communicate some information about Mr. N.'s doctrine, in order that the assembly might understand why they held to it that the doctrine should be judged, and this was peremptorily refused, and the paper which said that many had not a bad opinion of the doctrine, rejecting as a new condition of fellowship the examination into the doctrine, was laid down as the absolute condition of the pastorate of Messrs. M. and C., without which they would withdraw from their ministry in the midst of the assembly. Those who justified them on the ground of this paper were to rise, which was done by the assembly, 30 or 40 forthwith leaving B. So that, with knowledge of the matter, they laid down as the basis of the B. assembly, indifference to the truth as to the person of Christ, and they preferred to see about 40 godly brethren leave, rather than to examine into the question, having in fact in their midst the members of the meeting. This was so much the more important in my eyes, because Satan was seeking at that moment, and still seeks, to forbid the assembly of the children of God to examine into and to judge any heresy whatsoever, that once a person has been acknowledged as being a Christian, one has no right to know what he holds. This has been plainly laid down as a principle by many persons who blame us, and they desired to take advantage of it to force us to receive a young man who distinctly denied that there was such a person as the Holy Ghost. I do not say that all lay down this principle, but the enemy has sought to bring it in, and amongst the brethren who opposed me on this question, some of the most violent maintain it. Now the principle of indifference as to the person of Christ being laid down at Bethesda, and the assembly having publicly accepted it, I refuse to admit this principle. They have admitted persons put outside amongst us on account of blasphemy. Messrs. M. and C. are the pastors of the assembly in virtue of this principle. This letter has never been withdrawn, they claim to have done right. Many things will doubtless be told you in excuse, and to make it appear that they have done things which nullify this, I know how it is with them. For me their condition before God has become much, much worse. I should be ready to say why. I believe that they are themselves more or less infected with false doctrine, but I cannot enter into the story in detail. Mr. M. said to me, after having acknowledged that Christ would have needed to be saved as much as we, if this doctrine was admitted, that they maintained the letter of the 10 to the full, and that they had done well in all that they had done. Well, indifference to Christ is a grave sin. An assembly which bases itself publicly on this principle I cannot accept as a Christian assembly. Assemblies which are connected with B, which go there and receive from thence, are one with B, save the case of persons who are ignorant of the matter, an exceptional case of which it is not necessary to speak. For my part this is what I do, having distinctly taken my position I judge each case individually according to its merits, but I will not receive a person who keeps up his connection with B, with knowledge of the matter. Faithfulness to Christ before everything. I know not why I labor and suffer if this is not the principle of my conduct. The fact is that brethren had fallen into a state of spiritual demoralization which required this sifting, and as they get out of it individually they reject B, which is taking place, thank God, every day. Persons who have written tracts against me write their own condemnation, while declaring that they were deceived at Bristol. As to that, my resolution is taken. I am deeply convinced that the basis of the B meeting is contempt of Christ, and I do not walk with those who accept it, and I will not mix with it. It would be indifference to my own conduct. If consequently I walk alone it is well, I am content as to myself, I deplore the condition of souls. I do not say that all that has been done to oppose it has been wise. I do not think so, but my judgment of the matter in the main is definitively taken. I believe B in a much worse condition than at the beginning of the question. I do not desire to introduce such a question into the midst of brethren who are not in fact engaged in the evil. I fear Mr. W. is inclined to do so. He has done so to some degree here in my opinion. Your very affectionate. Hereford, October 6, 1861. 51103 F.